Hi, Rita.
Hi, Patrícia.
Let's start our conversation about the ethnographic archives. We should probably start by introducing ourselves. I can start. I'm Patrícia Pereira. I am a urban researcher, an urban sociologist, and I have lots of interest in methods, in developing methods and thinking about methods, and also I teach methods at this point. Mostly what the methods that interest me more, of course, are qualitative methods, and ethnography is a big part of it. I'm really glad to have this conversation with you. We have worked together, we know a little bit about each other's research. So I think this will be a very interesting conversation. Can you
Okay.
say some words about you, about yourself?
Yes, I'm Rita Cachado. I'm an urban anthropologist and I teach one course in the first semester at Lisbon, ISCTE, which is called Field Research. And it is a course for master students and Erasmus graduation students from different social sciences, and they want to learn a little bit on ethnographic tools, etc. So the course is about that, and this is a course I love to teach because I really love qualitative methodologies, specifically the tools concerning ethnography. So I'm really glad to teach this course beyond making research, of course.
Thank you. So I forgot to say that I'm based at Universidade Nova de Lisboa, so the new University of Lisbon, just to make that clear. And I think we can start. And I would like to ask you to begin. What are ethnographic archives? Can you introduce this item a little bit from
Yeah,
your own?
ethnographic archives can be conceived from a lot of point of views, of course, but concerning the composition of what is an ethnographic archive, it can hold like diaries, field notes, photographs, audio records, video records. You can also include like maps that you draw or that you adapt, because most of the times we work in a specific place, so sometimes maps are also primary data, and they can be considered part of ethnographic archives. What else? Drawings that you make or that people makes, and also photographs from people and objects that people sometimes give you, and that's part of your ethnographic archive as well. And that's it for the composition. I don't know if you want to know more about
Yeah,
what is
so everything that the ethnographer keeps from the
from a
field,
certain field. Yes.
and that the ethnographer can use in the analysis, but
Yes.
also sometimes the archives have things that are not used, right?
Oh,
Things
a
that
lot of
just
things. It's like
lay there.
we of course don't use uh, all parts of all interviews for making a classical sociological research, qualitative one. So it's the same with ethnographic archives. We use a part of it, and maybe they can be used later for other stuff, other researches, or used by other researchers. Um, and that's it. So that's why I don't know if you want to approach now this item, that but that's why we need to reflect on it. So not only the fact that they are data to be used in our analysis, but they should be kept properly uh, be safeguarded and preserve the materials. Because if you think, for instance, social scientists like 30 years ago, they used the cassettes and then the mini discs, and and materials with technologies, they get obsolete. So it's well, this is an example with cassettes and mini discs, a very illustrative example of uh, the need of preserving and of keeping up to date. So you need to digitalize, for instance, some materials, etc. But there's a lot of ways of thinking about this, but we need to be to yeah yes
Why
sir.
is it important? So
Mhm,
preserving
mhm.
this element. So the reflection about our own practices as ethnographer is
It's because
very.
of that, yeah, and it's I guess the first thing of all is that the ethnography, as a qualitative type of research, as another type of qualitative research, is unique. Is done in a certain time, a certain present. Anthropologists use the concept of ethnographic present. And this presence is not repeatable. So there's this author Decola that says this, and I guess this is very important. It's not repeatable. So we need this is a part of the history of some place of or some community, some population that is not repeated again. So these are first-hand materials or primary data that should be kept properly, like in specific archives for historians. You see that the boxes with primary data, which are like I don't know, some specific documents, letters, whatever. And ethnographers, they produce their own primary data, so we are responsible for keeping them in a way.
So for the history of the communities and the places that we research, because these are collaboratively produced data, right?
Yeah.
For the reflection about our own practices and problematization of our own practices as ethnographers and social scientists. Can you? This is very interesting. Can you just say, you said that there's an author who says this? Can you just tell us who this author is? Do you remember?
Pierre Decola.
Okay, thank
And I
you.
can,
So,
yeah, we can add the reference, I don't know, in a
yeah,
subtitle or something like that.
we'll do that.
Um, and um,
Okay.
and I guess you talked about something which is very important. That is, while producing these primary data, we are producing this primary data with people. It's of course it's our responsibility, and it's our responsibility to choose which type of materials would we share. In first place, what we share in our publications, in our results, but also in the future, what can we share, and what should we keep for ourselves or even delete. There are some anthropologies that choose to, the field notes just go away and they don't have to think more about that, because field notes speak a lot about people and behaviors, and it's very difficult to deal with. Um, Nevertheless, what I was saying is that they are produced with people, and the reflection is also this: we are producing this primary data with people. So, what can we do with that afterwards? And also, when we keep when we reflect, keeping and reflecting, some in this case is very close, isn't it? So we are keeping the materials because we reflect also about it, or or not. Some anthropologists, they just leave it in the attic, just it's there, and they don't touch it anymore. They don't know if it is obsolete or not. The family would do something when they die. Uh, but the truth is, they were done with people, and we should pay some respect with these people. And that's part of the reason why we should keep the ethnographic archives and know what to keep and what not to keep. There was like me and Sonia Vespera de Almeida is a colleague of mine, an anthropologist, and we work in a project, and we have a couple of articles about this the idea of ethnographic archives, but in one of the articles we wanted to title it like ethnographic archives, should we share or should we hide, following the Clash song, should I stay or should I go. And I guess it's very illustrative of the idea of the need to reflect on what to keep and what not to keep. Should I keep this? Should I delete, etc.
For ethical reasons, but
For
also other
ethical
reasons.
reasons, because we never know, and we should decide. We should decide what to do, and again with with Sonia in this project, we have together, one of the main goals is to interview ethnographers who are still alive, and to make to trace or to map their ethnographic archives, and what would they share and what would they not share, because what happens is that sometimes an ethnographer, an anthropologist dies, and the family and like a close colleague may go into their archives and they make their decisions. But people are alive, we should interview them and understand what is their view about what to keep, what to hide, etc.,
Like
etc.
an ethnographic will,
Yeah,
in a
yeah.
way.
Because the idea is again the same with making ethnography in a certain present. We have this present, and which in Portuguese is also the gift, the present and the gift of having these people alive. And there's this I don't know which this discipline does this come from, but there's this concept of coivity, and the coivities to it's the idea that it is present. We are coeves, you and me, because we are from the same generation. So since we have this opportunity of coevity, so we should take it and work on it, because it's rare. And
And how would you explain how can these ethnographic archives be considered creative? How are they a creative method, in
yeah,
your opinion?
that's a good question. They can be creative, I guess, by diverse ways. One of them is, of course, through art, which is precisely an area which is developed by this colleague of mine I've told you before. And some artists use ethnographic tools, for instance, not not so much with the ethnographic archives, but in the past, ethnographic objects in the museums, were what were, of course, ethnographic archives, the only ones. Now we can consider ethnographic archives the archives of each ethnographer, of course. But some artists use these museum objects or use some tools. For instance, in the neorealism, the Portuguese neorealism, Sonia has a work about that. Um, some authors would inspire themselves in in previous I would say research with people making conversations using ethnographic tools that they learn from sometimes from ethnographers as well. Then, our ethnographic archives also can be considered creative by other ethnographers who wish to make field works in the same fields where other. I don't know if this is. Do you understand the idea? So, um,
Revisitation, yes.
yeah,
You want to
when
make
people
work
want to make
revisitation.
revisitation, yes. um, and there's a lot of examples in many countries, of course, and we can do this with with ethnographic archives that are available or become available by them with field notes. Or even if the ethnographer is alive, we can also make new interviews with the ethnographer before going to the field, or even go with the previous ethnographer to the same field and start conversation with the same interlocutors, and then add new information. For instance, we can do that with for new topics. Imagine you approached family topics, gender topics, but you didn't approach ritual. So now you approach ritual, or you want to approach the same topic as is also the case in many cases, because most of the cases of revisitation, people want to make a comparison between the past and the present of the same community. What changed, what was kept. And sometimes also ethnographers make revisitations to their own fields to see what is new and what are the same traditions, etc. What else? What can I say? Also, I have a note here. Uh, um, for my interest, the ethnographic archives can be used creatively to understand the practices of other ethnographers. I'm really curious about how people work. In fact, well, of course, it's not only me. A lot of people are curious about how other people works, and that is very useful for to improve our own methodologies. When we learn really how the other person worked, then we can improve our own practices or change a little bit, or copy some of them also. Why not? And that's it for me. It's very, very interesting, that part of using ethnographic archives. And there's this marvelous author who speaks about it, and he has a marvelous book, and very inspiring book for people who want to work about field notes, which is Sanyek's book called Field Notes: The Makings of Anthropology. And with the makings, he wants to address the thing of the practices, the professional practices. And I
So
find
this
that
this
very,
idea,
very,
yeah.
very interesting to methodologically speaking, or even to give new hypotheses of new epistemologies. What else?
Yeah, for me, your own practice, what you yourself, you Rita, do with your archives is very creative and very interesting. And I would like for you to speak a
Mm,
little bit about that, because I know that you take your own field notes and field diaries, and you do specific analysis with them. And sometimes you go back to uh, older.
mhm,
Older field notes, and
mhm,
maybe also notes from fields that you are not no longer working on, and you do systematic analysis of your field notes. And this is very interesting for me, because you get results that are quite different from the usual less systematic analysis, and I would like you to talk a little bit about that. But also, I know that you have been doing sort of a diary of your pandemic time, and then you did also some very creative analysis of it, and I would like to hear about it also in
Okay.
this short.
No, the idea of indexing or systematizing field notes comes precisely from Saniak. I read it while I was doing my PhD, and I realized that I only had a few interviews, recorded interviews, but I had a lot of field notes. And I asked the professor, his name is Brian O'Neill, and he is very passionate about methodologies, ethnographic methodologies. And of course, he knew about a bunch of authors on this stuff, so he advised me to read this book of Saniak. And from then on, I realized that it's so important to make a good rereading of our field notes to grasp new hypotheses. To, for instance, when you do that, when you systematize your field notes, it's impossible to forget or to it's impossible to forget some categories. Sometimes we note, I say we because I try that my students do the same, and we note that the for instance, you can have you. I was working about housing. I guess it's better to give this personal example. I was working about housing. I had, of course, many entries in the field notes about housing, and I had many entries about 25 different categories, and more than one was about religion. But then there was like one dedicated to general stuff about religion, which was not specific, not rituals, not whatever. It was general. And this category had a lot more than the other categories, along with methodologies. But it was so important, and I was working about housing, of course, with the population, and which was very religious. This was very evident for me, very clear. But what I didn't know before reading the diary is that it was so central in their lives and so central in my field notes. So that gave me very important tips to make interpretations. And without that, I would do more subjective interpretations, and I'm completely okay with subjective stuff while working with qualitative methodologies. But this is one of the fears that the people while taking qualitative methodologies we have. Oh, I'm working with very subjective data, field notes, and everything. And without this, without making an indexation and a systematization of the diaries, the field notes, we feel more insecure. So when we do this, we feel more secure about our data and about our field as well. I don't know if
Okay,
this.
and how about your pandemic diary?
Oh, the pandemic diary. uh, okay, I'm gonna be myself. I will say why I make this. I started in the day one of the when the pandemics was announced by the international the health.
OMS,
What? What's the name?
Health, World Health Organization.
That's it. WHO. Yes. Um, and from then on, I began my diary because I thought I will be depressed if I don't make something for myself every day a little bit. So I decided to make a small journal every day for 5 minutes. In a few months, I found out that it was like a trend all over the world. Like we all should make 10 minutes journals every day. It's very good for our
Mental health.
Yeah, yeah, mental health and everything. So it's just a trend. So I imagine there's like thousands of journals written every day from the first day of the pandemics.
Yes,
Okay.
but you are an ethnographer, and an ethnographer that likes to reflect on the practices of producing field
Yeah,
notes and journals and diaries. So I think that your
yeah,
outcome and the reflections you produced are
yeah.
very interesting and also very creative in this sense.
At a certain point, I understood that, of course, I would have many things about family, about taking small walks, um, and the first times that I went to have dinner with friends or went to the capital, which is just across the river. Um, and I had an opportunity recently to aggregate the data about urban stuff in a conference, Urban Sociology, RRN 37,
37.
which
Yes.
is from ESA, the European Sociological Association, and you were one of the organizers. And and for me, it was an opportunity of aggregate and try to make something from it. And
So
of
the
course,
urban data that you aggregated the urban data from this diary that was a very personal diary,
mhm, mhm.
also, but also had some insights into
Mhm.
um,
Oh
how
yeah,
the
completely.
city, the city where you live, functioned during the pandemic. So this will be, I think, a very valuable archive for people who would want to study cities during the pandemic from a very personal and subjective point of view. So I believe that keeping your journal and passing it along as an archive to other researchers can also be very interesting. What do you think about that?
I don't know. I didn't think about that. I really like to reflect about ethnographic archives, but I'm not very good in keeping them and deciding. I guess
Mm,
it's very difficult to decide what to do. I keep my journals, of course, in the computer, but then I have a few notebooks. Some of them I keep them because, well, for certain reasons. And but I don't know. I'm afraid to reread them again. I reread them to make my master thesis, but then I didn't. I'm afraid that there's a lot of material that should go to the garbage. Nevertheless, I can think of it um as we think about other materials or with authorship. And we know there's this European rule that if you can use a book without asking for the
permission?
copyrights. You don't have to ask
Mhm.
for it if the author is dead uh, 70
For
years
75
before.
years.
Yeah, I guess it's that. So you can use, for instance, works from, of course, Greeks and authors from the 19th century, completely okay. And I guess that's a good way of thinking. If you think that your materials can be completely open in 75 years after you die, you can do that. And you don't know if they are interesting enough, of course, but also what we discovered, me and Sonia, while doing this research, is that there's a problem with at least Portuguese anthropologists because they think that they are not like the classical guys, and we don't have like a bunch of stars of ethnographers, international stars. So they think about themselves as, oh, I'm just an ethnographer, very with very humble and sometimes modesty, but we don't. I guess more than that, they didn't think enough about their primary data. And it's important to think about that and to decide what to do. But we never know if in the future the topics you approach will be important to other people. For instance, we both work about housing. And when I started to work on housing, nobody was talking about housing at that time. Before that, yes. And after that, yes. But I never thought that my diary could be important or my publications on housing. And then I was very happy. Oh, I have this publication from 2013, I guess, which is very cited because the topic became not trendy,
Very.
it's not the word, uh, became important in society, in most of European societies,
And in academia, yeah.
and in academia, of course.
Yeah,
So
so
we
maybe
never
we're
know if the topics become important,
relevant.
yeah,
Yeah.
prominence, yes.
Yes. Okay. Thank you. So, yeah, my next and last question would be about urban ethnography
Mhm.
specifically. Can you tell us a little bit about how these ethnographic archives are important specifically for
Yeah,
urban ethnography, urban
in a
ethnography?
way,
Or
it's
are
very,
they?
yeah, 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 they are, of course. For me, in a way, it's very obvious, but in although it's obvious that they are important because they tell the history of urban settings, of urban dynamics. And if you think about contemporary cities in many places, I'm not saying around in all the world, but why not? Uh, Cities are very, very dynamic. There's a lot of things happening, and ethnographers are recording parts of that, aren't they? For instance, ethnographers who make work about graffiti, is painted and then it disappears in time with time. So they have photographs that they should keep, isn't it? For instance, it's just an example. And what I would like to do is to map, at least to map these researches that people have been doing in the last decades, um, last 15 years, for instance, to map what they have, to map what they would share, what they are available to share to the academic community, but also what they would share if there were an exhibition, for instance, what and also what they would share with the population with whom they worked. Um, because, for instance, in the United States, this is very, very important. It's very clear with the indigenous populations because people can, when they can uh, access the ethnographic archives from ethnographers who made works on their indigenous communities, then sometimes they can, for instance, um
Claim
reivindicate,
something.
claim
Claim
something,
something. Yeah.
claim
Oh,
for
that's
territory, or so you never know if you need to claim for your artist's rights, for instance, if we are talking about graffiti recordings, or if there are other type of claims,
yeah. But
okay.
in our day and age, where everything gets recorded, photographed, so we have and also disseminated because we have social media. And
Mhm. Yeah.
uh, why why are the ethnographic archives important more than these other
Mhm.
like
Yeah.
storage of
Yeah.
data about our urban contemporary lives?
That is very important as well, but people, when sharing in social media, most of the people didn't have like a big reflection on what they are recording and sharing to the web community, uh, and also ethnographers are not journalists, just a thing we say in classes, isn't it? So, of course, we can make some records for a day, but ethnographers typically stay more than a day or two or three. They stay more time. And more than time, what they have is interactions and relationships with people, and this ethical reflection, which is continuous along the process of making ethnography. So, of course, the data that they have, the materials that they collect, are fruit of this mutuality
Concerns.
interaction
Hmm.
with interlocutors. So I guess that's why they can be more at least significant, more,
Or different.
or
I
just
mean,
different. Yes,
complementary.
different. They're not.
Yes,
It's
because
not
they
more important. Can be more important. Some stuff which is in the social media can be really, really important. I don't know. I'm not hierarchizing. Just saying that it's different, and we should pay attention to it.
it's a different perspective and it's more in depth and
That's
it's
it.
also you know that it has been created collaboratively,
Hmm.
right? It's a perspective that is more collective than just personal, although it is also personal, right,
Yeah,
from the
yeah.
ethnographer
It's your responsibility, but it's produced with people uh, with
who shared
whom.
with you.
Yeah.
Okay. So I think we will stop here. Thank you so much, Rita, for
Thank
this
you. It was
conversation.
very, very nice.
Yeah, we talked about some things that we had already talked about and some things that we hadn't talked
Hmm.
about before. So it was really interesting.
Really
Thank you
appreciate
very
it.
much.
Thank you.
Bye bye.
Ciao.